In this week's In-Ear Insights, let's talk about prompt engineering and software development. And that sounds like two very different things, but surprisingly, they are one and the same. And here's why. The definition of programming is you write some sequence of text that you give to a machine to get a repeatable, reliable result. So you write in C++ or Python or Java code that does a thing that spits out a result. And ideally, your code is good and you get good results. When you're writing prompts with generative AI, with large language models, you're programming. You're just programming in a language like English or French or Danish and not C++, which means that you should also be adopting the practices of good software engineering because you're really actually writing code. You should be protecting your code. You should be auditing your code. So, Katie, you have managed teams of developers, and bless your heart, you've been managing me for the last 10 years. When it comes to prompt engineering and the development of prompts and the sharing of them internally and the debugging of them, people, particularly marketers, seem to be just winging it as opposed to having a practice around it that scales well. So when it comes to managing prompt engineering, sort of the prompt development lifecycle, if you will, what should people be thinking about?
Oh, they should be thinking about requirements first and foremost. So let me sort of take a step back a little bit. I was actually just looking on our website to see if we had our version of the SDLC, which is the software development lifecycle. And we probably do somewhere. I don't know if we have it as an instant insights, but what you're talking about, Chris, the reason why this came up is we were having a conversation last week and you started to draw the connection between the software development lifecycle and prompt engineering and said that there's a lot of overlap. And so the question is, could you adapt the software development lifecycle to be used for prompt engineering? And the answer is yes. You can very easily adapt it. And so just to sort of take a step back, the software development lifecycle, much like any other project management or project development lifecycle, falls into a few main buckets, a few main phases. So you have your requirements gathering. What are your business goals? What are your development goals? What are you going to need? And then what is your, approach, your process? What tools you're going to use? Surprisingly, these all fall into the 5 Ps. But so it's basically like, what do you want to do? What do you need? You execute the thing, you test the thing, and then you go back and iterate the thing. And so it could very easily fall into the 5P framework. So the 5 Ps are purpose, people, process, platform, performance. So in this case, the purpose is I want to write a prompt to do X. And then you have the people. So in this case, it's I need to gather requirements from the stakeholders because X is the goal, or this is something I can do myself because I have all the information. The process, well, what is the prompt, going to contain? Do I need to do some additional research? Do I need to do, some iterative testing? How am I going to know that these things are all working? The platform seems straightforward, but there may be other platforms involved. So the platform could be, this is the platform that I'm going to write the prompt in, but I also then need to extract data from the following 6 platforms, which then, feeds the process. And then performance. How do I know I did the thing? You can take software development and fit it into the 5 Ps, but traditional software development follows the software development lifecycle, which is well known amongst the development communities. And so I'm not necessarily going to try to like squeeze the software development lifecycle into the 5 Ps, but a lot of the same phases apply. So all of that to say, there's a lot of overlap with prompt engineering because at its core, you are, quote unquote, I'm putting this in air quotes for those not watching, you're developing something. And development doesn't have to be, I'm sitting at a computer writing code and then I'm going to get some sort of output like, turn this, background blue. And then you have to write the command for that. Development could be, I want to create something that is repeatable. And so you can use the same type of methodology and apply it to your prompt engineering. And that was a sort of very long-winded way of saying, yes, there is an overlap between the two.
Okay. So where do we get started? Because what happens right now, what happens today is open up Chat GPT or Google Gemini or Anthropic's Claude set and just start typing. Like, okay, I'm gonna write a prompt to clean up transcripts from our podcast. We've got this great podcast. We've got these transcripts that AI tools generate, but of course, those transcripts are not necessarily grammatically correct. They're kind of messy. There's weird spacing and punctuation. What should I be doing? Because what I will typically do, and many people would, is just say, hey, summarize this transcript or edit the grammar in this transcript. They have a very short prompt. And we, of course, know that that's not an effective way to do anything with a language model, because language models are like the world's smartest intern. They are very smart, but they need a lot of guidance. Now, I could just ask a tool like Gemini, like, hey, what are some best practices for cleaning up transcripts? That is one of the 4 power questions that we recommend. If you have not got our pair framework, which you can get at trustinsights.ai/power questions, that is an effective way to start the process of developing requirements. But really, I probably shouldn't just jump right in, should I?
No. I mean, you're asking questions you already know the answers to. It's the same thing with software development. So one of the challenges that I used to run into with my development team was they would just want to go. They would just want to do things and get things done. They didn't want to sit through what they felt were hours and hours and hours of requirements gathering when they already knew, well, you're telling me you want to take this from a CD-ROM to an online version. Okay, great. Let me just go ahead and do that. But when you start to dig into all of the features and the nuance, you realize that it's not just a one-to-one. You actually have to map out, well, what you can do on a CD-ROM is not the same as what you can do in an online version. And yes, I'm dating myself. That was one of the major projects that I had to oversee and manage. And we got there. It was painful because we didn't do thorough enough requirements gathering, because there was so much impatience of, let me just put fingers to keyboard and do the thing. I probably already know what you want. But we ended up having to back out of a lot of things that were done because of the lack of requirements gathering. When you think about prompt engineering, if you start to go down the path of, I'm going to build a ideal customer profile. Here's my customer profile. Here's what I want to know. And then you start to go down this path and you're priming the model and you're training the model, but you haven't clearly thought out what it is you want it to do, what the outcomes are. Then you've spent all of this time not getting the result that you're after. And then you have to back out of it and start over. And what it really comes down to is, how much time are you willing to waste? How much time can you afford to waste? How many resources can you afford to just use and not get the result you're after? And so if you put it in terms of people and dollars, can you afford to not get what you're after? And most of the time, the answer is no. So that's why you want to stop and at least do some kind of requirements gathering up front. If I'm doing an ideal customer profile, if I'm using generative AI, what else do I need? Do I have all of this other information, or am I just going to kind of wing it?
Right. So for those who don't know, because it was not part of your professional stuff, the software development lifecycle broadly is, you plan it, you gather the requirements, you build it, you test it, you debug the heck out of it, you deploy it, and then you maintain it. With prompt engineering, those steps still apply, right? So you plan it. What do we want this thing to do? Well, in this case, I want a prompt that will clean up podcast transcripts. What are our requirements? This is surprisingly more complicated than you would think it should be, because when you ask a language model to clean up a transcript, what tends to happen is it tends to rewrite it, tends to summarize it, and remove your voice. So part of the things that you just say is, okay, well, I want to clean up grammar, I want it to fix punctuation, I want it to fix the weird spacing that every transcript tool seems to publish, but I don't want it to change what I said. So if Katie, if you and I are talking on this podcast, I want it to preserve the different distinct ways that you and I speak. What other things go into this requirements gathering? How do you know, like, this is something that I should be asking about, or this is something that I should be specifying when you're doing requirements gathering?
One of the tricks that we used to do when we were trying to gather requirements from stakeholders was to make them list out the things that they don't want. And that actually starts to narrow it down. And so in this instance, if you're talking about cleaning up the transcript, I don't want you to change my voice. I don't want you to rewrite sentences unless, it's hugely grammatically correct. I don't want you to, change the meaning or whatever. And so if it's a way to back into your requirements, if you're not sure what to ask up front to say, I want you to do the following things. Because a lot of times, and this is true for everybody, is like we don't know what we want, but we do know what we don't want. We can be very clear about what we don't want. And so I would say if, even for something as seemingly straightforward as cleaning up a transcript, if you start to list out what you don't want, it'll be very clear, you'll very easily see. So like this is like a great example of where we clean up. As I'm stumbling over my sentence, trying to put my thoughts together, it could be something that could be cleaned up, but you need to specify in the requirements and not just leave the decision making up to the system, because the system isn't making decisions. It's following your exact instructions. So you could specify, I don't want you to clean up my incomplete sentences. I want you to leave those as is to maintain my voice.
Exactly. Another thing that is important to do as you're developing prompts is, and this again goes back to our pair framework, is to ask the system, hey, what did I forget? If I'm building a prompt to do this or that. If you have the requirements, if you have the user story, you can say, what did I forget to implement? And it will tell you in very clear language. So, for example, I did this recently with this prompt, and it said, well, what language are you speaking? Oh, well, I'm speaking USA English. Well, actually, I said I'm speaking English. And it said, well, what version of English are you speaking? Like, oh, USA English. Okay. What kind of transcript is it? It's a podcast. It says, how many speakers are there? Oh, I mean, 2, but I forget. It's an intern. It doesn't know any of this. It's
Mhm.
asking me these questions. It said, hey, are there specific words and phrases that are like technical terms or jargon that you would use in this podcast? I'm like, yeah, of course. It's the In-Ear Insights podcast. But I know our transcription software sometimes gets that wrong. We'll say
Mhm.
in year or in there, what's something that's not correct. And so all of that is part of, I guess it's part of both. It's interesting because with a prompt, it's part of the requirements gathering and the prompt itself, because the prompt is plain language. So you're kind of doing
Mhm.
2 things at once.
Well, and what occurs to me is, and this is one of the challenges that people run into with the requirements is they feel like it's this long, process that just takes forever. But everything that you've stated is something that you can write down once and continue to use over and over again. Like for in-ear insights, it's always 2 speakers. These are always the branded terms that we use. These are always the technical terms that we're, using. Every week when I grab the transcript from our live stream, so what? The Marketing Analytics and Insights live show, I have to change the title because the transcript always puts it as SWOT, as in a SWOT analysis, SWOT, when I'm saying so what? And that could be on me in terms of how quickly or, not clearly I'm speaking, or it's just that the transcription software is imperfect. And so those are things that you can start to build into your, software development requirements to start every single time I do this task. There's always gonna be 2 speakers. I always want you to change these words to be spelled this way. Trust Insights looks this way. Like, you can list out those things, and you can start to build out that longer set of requirements that you use over and over and over again. And I think that that's one of the things that, I know you do it, Chris. You have this library of prompts that you use to prime all of the models with, but I think a lot of us, myself included, we just don't keep that information. For some ridiculous reason, we start from scratch every single time. And for some reason, when we do this, we find it to be incredibly frustrating and go, oh, generative AI is not for me. It just takes too long. I can just do it myself. Versus what you're doing, which is banking all of these requirements to use over and over and over again.
Exactly. And to your point, a lot of them can be reused, which is part of That's part of the point of software. So let's take a look at this prompt. If you are not watching this, if you're listening, you can find this at trustinsights.ai/YouTube. You'll be able to see the prompt. So I start off by saying, today you'll be editing transcripts for clarity. The key objectives: clean up grammar, fix punctuation, fix spelling errors, apply formatting and spacing. Context: the speaker names, Christopher Penn and Katie Robert. Transcript type: to host podcast. Target audience: business professionals. That was one of the questions that the model asked me is, okay, well, who is the intended audience of the cleaned up transcript? Like, oh, that's
Mhm.
kind of interesting. The language is USA English, and then there's a long list of specific terms. And then in the instructions section, this is exactly what you were saying, Katie. There's a long list of what not to do. Do not
Mhm.
paraphrase or summarize. Maintain original wording and sentence structure. Do remove filler words such as unlike. Remove false starts and other speech interruptions. Keep contractions and slang as delivered by the speaker. Keep acronyms as delivered by the speaker. Use M dashes instead of N dashes. Do not include nonverbal cues because some software will put in in brackets laughter. Like, we don't want that.
Mhm.
Break apart run-on sentences into discrete sentences. Spell out numbers at the beginning of sentences. Use numbers in the middle and end of sentences. Duplicate words next to each other should be deduplicated. Duplicate sentences should be deduplicated. Duplicate phrases should be deduplicated. Stop words like and variations should be removed, and there's examples. Ending sentences with right should be removed, and there's examples. And then there's a whole section of here's the original text, here's what properly corrected text looks like, and here's what improperly corrected text looks like. So this is a 2.5-page prompt. To your point, this is something that I reuse it. Like, it actually, in Chat GPT, you would turn this into a custom GPT. In Gemini, you would put this in as system instructions. But either way, that's what this prompt ends up looking like when you go through that long requirements gathering. But once it's done, boy, have you
It's
got a
done.
prompt that is going to perform the same way every time.
And of course, I'm looking at this. I'm like, wow, this is so scalable because we have hundreds, if not thousands, of transcripts that need to be cleaned up. That prior to generative AI, we were trying to have a human do it, and it was just going poorly because the human wasn't following these sets of instructions, and our voices were getting lost. And so I'm looking at this, I'm like, wow, well, I know someone on our team who is going to immediately get a copy of this set of requirements and start cleaning up all of the transcripts. So to go back to the instructions, I think it's a really good pro tip. If you don't know where to start with requirements, start listing out what you don't want. And that makes the process go faster because you start to very quickly narrow down what's left.
Exactly. And then in the software development lifecycle, the maintenance is also iteration. So if you
Mhm.
put in a transcript and the model misbehaves, but you can identify what it misbehaved on, you can then go back and say, add new rules to this. Say, when you see this, don't do this instead. You give it examples. This is a technique called few-shot prompting, few-shot learning. The more you can provide that guidance to the model, the better it's going to perform. So
Mhm.
this is all I would call this the testing and the QA portion of the development, and then the maintenance portion. So even though it seems like it's a non-technical thing, hey, I'm going to write a prompt to do X. If you want it to scale and you want it to perform reliably, this would be the methodology to use that would give you the outputs you want. So the prompt development lifecycle. We're gonna coin a new thing today. The prompt development lifecycle allows you to get that reliability and, to your point, the scalability, because you could take this whole thing, put it into like a Python script, and have it start going through transcripts one by one
Mhm.
automatically.
You just said something that I wanna, unpack a little bit, which was, you're talking about the software development life cycle, and then you're talking about prompt engineering, and you're saying, you know, even if it's a non-technical thing. The thing about the software development life cycle is that, yes, it applies to software development, but it's a life cycle. It's a framework. It can apply to technical and non-technical things. It's one of the reasons why I developed the 5P framework. It can apply to technical and non-technical things. It's a decision-making framework. The same is true of the software development life cycle, of the project life cycle, of the product development life cycle. They are decision-making frameworks meant to guide you through the whole process of getting from A to B, from start to finish, from idea to outcome. And so I think I would encourage people who are trying to figure out, well, prompt engineering, it's too technical, or well, they're saying it's the akin to the software development lifecycle. I'm not developing software, so that doesn't apply to me. Take the idea of it being technical out of it and look at it as a framework. And that's
Exactly.
really all it is. That's all it comes down to is it's a set of instructions. It's, Chris, as you like to say, it's a recipe book. And so people of all skill levels can follow recipes. Like, I can follow the recipe on the back of, a box if it's going to tell me how to bake a cake because I just have to add oil and 2 eggs, or I can follow a recipe to start from scratch that is the same quality that's used in like a 5-star James Beard restaurant. I can do both of those things because at the end of the day, it's just a set of instructions.
Exactly. And so the prompt development lifecycle, if you think about it, really is the recipe for making recipes.
It's very,
Very meta.
very matrixy.
Exactly. Very Inception. So I think we'll probably end up putting something like this in an instant insights on the website at some point. So if you haven't had a chance, go pop over to trustinsights.ai. If you've got some prompt development tips that you would like to share, pop on over to our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,000 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every single week about AI, analytics, and data. And wherever it is that you watch or listen to this show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on instead, go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, where you can find us on the channel of your choice. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. It does help share the show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.